The quiet suburb of Maple Grove, just a few miles outside the city, was a peaceful retreat for families seeking safety and a place to raise their children. But inside one house on Sycamore Lane, a deadly storm was brewing. The Davis family lived in a large, comfortable home at the end of a cul-de-sac. Thomas Davis, a successful real estate agent, had built a thriving career over the years, providing his family with financial security and an enviable lifestyle. His wife, Lisa, had dedicated herself to their home and their two children, 17-year-old Megan and 14-year-old Jake. To everyone who knew them, the Davis family appeared perfect, a portrait of suburban success. "They were always so friendly," recalled one neighbor. "You'd see them at soccer games, hosting barbecues, or walking their dog. They were the kind of family you'd want to be." "They seemed like the most stable family in the neighborhood," said another. Tom worked hard, and Lisa was always involved with the kids. Nothing seemed wrong at all. But no one outside the Davis household could see the cracks forming behind closed doors. Beneath the polished exterior, tensions simmered. After nearly 2 decades of marriage, Thomas and Lisa's relationship had grown strained. Thomas spent long hours at work, pouring his energy into his career, and often leaving Lisa to manage the household alone. Lisa, once vibrant and full of life, had grown increasingly lonely. The couple's once strong bond had eroded, leaving behind a hollow partnership that was slowly crumbling. It hadn't always been this way. In the early years of their marriage, Lisa and Thomas had been inseparable. They built their life together with shared dreams, laughter, and a deep love that felt unbreakable. Lisa had been proud of the family they created, taking comfort in the belief that their life in Maple Grove was the culmination of everything they had worked for. But as Thomas's real estate career flourished, so did the distance between them. He began to work late into the evenings, attending networking events, meeting with high-profile clients, and traveling for business. At first, Lisa understood. After all, his success benefited the entire family. But as the years went on, Thomas's absence became the norm rather than the exception. Lisa tried to stay busy, immersing herself in her children's lives, hosting community events, and volunteering at the local school. She was determined to keep up the appearance of the perfect family. But deep down, she felt abandoned. The long, lonely nights weighed heavily on her. There were times when she would sit on the porch, staring at the driveway, waiting for Thomas to come home, only to realize that the man she once knew had become a stranger. As Thomas buried himself deeper into his work, Lisa became more isolated. She often found herself reminiscing about the early days of their marriage when their connection was strong, and they couldn't wait to spend time together. Now there were only awkward silences, half-hearted conversations, and a growing sense of resentment that neither could bring themselves to address. The tension between them was palpable, and even their children, though unaware of the details, could sense the distance between their parents. In the summer of 2016, that hollow partnership became the breeding ground for a secret that would tear the Davis family apart. Megan Davis was a typical teenager. Outgoing and popular, she excelled in school and was involved in numerous extracurricular activities. In her junior year of high school, Megan started dating Kyle Rivers, a charming athletic boy who quickly won over Megan's parents. Kyle, who had been Megan's classmate since middle school, seemed like the perfect match for her. He was polite, respectful, and fit right in with the Davis family's suburban image. Over time, Kyle became a regular presence in the Davis home. He would spend afternoons with Megan, hanging out in the backyard, watching movies, or studying in the living room. Kyle had a natural ease about him, which made him well-liked by everyone, including Lisa. At first, the connection between Kyle and Lisa was nothing more than friendly banter, innocent conversations about school, sports, or the weather. But as time went on, their interactions became more frequent. Whenever Megan left the room, Kyle would strike up conversations with Lisa, sharing stories about his life, asking her about her day. Lisa, flattered by the attention, found herself enjoying these moments more than she should have. Kyle was everything Thomas wasn't. He was attentive, affectionate, and eager to listen. It didn't take long for Lisa to start confiding in him. She told him about the loneliness she felt in her marriage, how she missed the days when Thomas would come home with flowers or surprise her with a romantic dinner. Kyle, sensing her vulnerability, listened intently, offering words of comfort and understanding. The more they talked, the closer they became. What began as innocent conversations quickly evolved into something far more dangerous. Kyle, though still in high school, was drawn to Lisa's vulnerability. She was an attractive woman who had been neglected for years, and Kyle, with his youthful energy and attentive nature, filled a void that Thomas had long since ignored. At first, it was small gestures, lingering glances, fleeting touches. Soon, however, the attraction between them grew impossible to ignore. Lisa knew she was crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. But after years of emotional neglect, she was willing to risk everything for the attention she had so desperately craved. In the back of her mind, she knew it was wrong. She knew that Kyle was Megan's boyfriend, and that their relationship would destroy her family if it ever came to light. But the thrill of the forbidden was intoxicating. One summer afternoon, while Megan was out with friends, Kyle and Lisa found themselves alone in the Davis house. As they sat in the kitchen, talking and laughing, the tension between them reached a boiling point. Without thinking, Kyle leaned in and kissed Lisa. She didn't pull away. In that moment, all of the guilt and fear melted away, replaced by a wave of desire that neither of them could resist. From that day forward, their affair escalated. Whenever the house was empty or Megan was away, Lisa and Kyle would steal moments together. They would meet in secret, sneaking into the guest room or slipping away during family gatherings. The affair progressed quickly, fueled by a mix of passion and the thrill of forbidden love. As the affair deepened, Lisa found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. She was both exhilarated and terrified. She knew the affair was wrong, that it could destroy not just her marriage but also her relationship with her daughter. But she couldn't stop. Kyle had become her escape, a temporary relief from the overwhelming sense of emptiness that had consumed her for years. By the fall of 2016, the affair had grown more brazen. Kyle and Lisa's secret meetings became more frequent, and they became bolder in their efforts to keep the relationship hidden. Megan, blissfully unaware of the betrayal unfolding behind her back, continued to see Kyle as the charming, attentive boyfriend who seemed perfect for her. As for Thomas, he was too consumed by his work to notice the signs of the growing tension between his wife and her secret lover. Detectives who later investigated the case reflected on the dangers that come with such betrayals. In situations like this, people often underestimate the emotional toll of secrecy and guilt, one detective explained. The longer it goes on, the more volatile the situation becomes. In this case, that volatility would prove fatal. For months, Lisa and Kyle managed to keep their relationship hidden. But secrets this explosive can't remain buried forever. In February 2017, Megan's world came crashing down. While using Kyle's phone to search for a video, she stumbled upon a string of explicit text messages and photos exchanged between her mother and her boyfriend. Megan's hands shook as she scrolled through the messages, disbelief and horror washing over her. What she found left no room for doubt. Kyle and her mother were involved in a passionate affair. Megan confronted Kyle immediately. The confrontation was explosive, with accusations flying and emotions running high. Kyle tried to deny it at first, But when faced with the evidence, he had no choice but to admit the truth. He claimed the affair had been a mistake, something that spiraled out of control. He apologized profusely, insisting he never meant to hurt Megan. Devastated and betrayed, Megan fled the house, leaving Kyle behind. She drove straight to her father's office, unable to keep the crushing secret any longer. When Megan told her father what she had discovered, Thomas was consumed with rage. His wife, the woman he had loved for nearly 20 years, had betrayed him in the worst possible way, not only with another man but with their daughter's teenage boyfriend. The humiliation and anger swirled inside him, and Thomas struggled to contain his fury. Detectives who later worked the case described the intensity of the emotions involved. When betrayal happens within a family, the emotional stakes are much higher, one detective noted. In this case, Thomas's anger wasn't just about the affair. It was about the humiliation, the sense of betrayal by the two people he trusted most. For weeks, tension gripped the Davis household. Lisa and Thomas fought bitterly, their arguments escalating with each passing day. Thomas couldn't bear to look at his wife, and Lisa was drowning in guilt and shame. Megan, heartbroken and furious, withdrew from both of her parents, unable to face the emotional wreckage of her family. Meanwhile, Kyle desperately tried to repair the damage he had caused. He sent Megan countless messages, begging for her forgiveness, insisting that he still loved her and that their relationship could survive this betrayal. But Megan wanted nothing to do with him. She blocked his number, ignored his calls, and avoided him at school. The boy she had once loved was now a constant reminder of the deepest betrayal she had ever experienced. As the weeks went on, Thomas became increasingly unhinged. He spent long nights drinking, obsessing over the affair, replaying every moment in his mind. He couldn't understand how his marriage had fallen apart so completely. His anger simmered beneath the surface, festering until it became unbearable. Then, on the night of March 24th, 2017, everything came to a head. That evening, the Davis family had planned a tense dinner to discuss the future of their crumbling family. But what was meant to be a civil conversation quickly devolved into a shouting match. Thomas, fueled by alcohol and weeks of pent-up rage, unleashed his fury on Lisa, accusing her of destroying their family. Megan, sitting at the table in stunned silence, watched as her parents' marriage imploded before her eyes. Suddenly, without warning, Thomas snapped. Grabbing a kitchen knife from the counter, he lunged at Lisa, his face twisted in a mask of rage. Thomas lunged at Lisa, driven by weeks of pent-up fury and alcohol-fueled rage. The kitchen, once a place of family dinners and laughter, now became a battleground of violence and terror. Megan screamed as she watched her father attack her mother. Lisa, caught completely off guard, stumbled backward, knocking over a chair in her frantic attempt to escape. But Thomas was too fast, his anger giving him a terrifying strength. The knife slashed through the air, and Lisa let out a piercing scream as it grazed her arm. Blood splattered across the kitchen floor. The realization of what was happening seemed to hit Thomas in waves, but he was too consumed by his emotions to stop himself. Every betrayal, every painful memory flooded his mind, pushing him over the edge. Megan, paralyzed with fear for a split second, snapped into action. She grabbed the nearest object, a heavy glass vase from the dining table, and swung it at her father with all her strength. The vase shattered against Thomas's back, causing him to stumble and drop the knife. "Stop it! Stop it!" Megan screamed, her voice choked with fear and tears. But the violence didn't end there. Thomas turned, his eyes wild with a mixture of anger and confusion, momentarily dazed by Megan's attack. But as he looked into his daughter's terrified face, something shifted in him. He dropped to his knees, breathing heavily, as if suddenly realizing the magnitude of what he had just done. Blood was still dripping from the knife, and Lisa was on the ground, clutching her arm, sobbing in pain. The silence that followed was suffocating. For what felt like an eternity, no one moved. Thomas, his face pale, stared at his wife, then at the blood on his hands. Megan was standing frozen in place, her body trembling uncontrollably. In the distance, they could hear the faint sound of sirens. Someone, likely a neighbor, must have heard the commotion and called the police. Lisa, with her good arm, pressed a towel against her wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Tears streamed down her face, not just from the pain, but from the complete destruction of the life she had known. She had betrayed her husband, hurt her daughter, and now, in a fit of uncontrollable rage, her husband had tried to kill her. "Dad, please, stop," Megan sobbed, barely able to form the words. You can't do this." Thomas dropped the knife and collapsed to the floor, his face buried in his hands as the weight of his actions came crashing down on him. He had destroyed everything. His wife, his daughter, his family. It was all shattered beyond repair. The sirens grew louder, and the flashing lights of police cars filled the street outside the Davis home. Minutes later, police officers burst into the house, guns drawn, shouting commands. Thomas didn't resist. He sat motionless on the kitchen floor, staring blankly ahead as the officers handcuffed him. Lisa was quickly rushed to the hospital, her arm bandaged by paramedics at the scene. Megan, in shock, watched as her father was led away in handcuffs, the man who had once been her hero now reduced to a broken figure of shame. The tragedy of the Davis family didn't end with that fateful night. Thomas was charged with attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, and domestic violence. In the courtroom, his once successful career and pristine reputation meant nothing. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison for the attack on Lisa. The judge, while acknowledging the emotional turmoil that had led to the incident, could not overlook the brutality of the act. Lisa survived the attack, but her wounds went far beyond the physical scars. After her recovery, she filed for divorce and moved away from Maple Grove, unable to face the memories of the life she had once shared with Thomas. Megan, still grappling with the emotional trauma of that night, distanced herself from both of her parents. She couldn't forgive her mother for the betrayal or her father for the violence. The relationship between them was irreparably broken. Kyle, the catalyst for the family's implosion, faded from their lives as well. Megan severed all ties with him, unable to look at him without being reminded of the destruction he had helped cause. He left town shortly after the scandal broke, his reputation in ruins. Years passed, but the shadow of the Davis family's tragedy loomed over Maple Grove, refusing to fade into memory. The once idyllic suburb, with its tree-lined streets and tight-knit community, had become a place forever haunted by the events on Sycamore Lane. For the residents, the Davis story became something more than just a scandal. It was a chilling reminder of how easily lives could unravel behind the closed doors of even the most perfect homes. Lisa, after the attack, never returned to the house she once called home. Following her recovery, she sold the Davis property at a loss, unable to bear the memories of the place where her life had fallen apart. The sale was swift, the new owners unaware or unwilling to acknowledge the home's grim history. Lisa moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, her once vibrant personality dulled by guilt and regret. Megan's life had been irreversibly shaped by the events of that year. While she tried to focus on her studies and build a new life for herself, the trauma of discovering her mother's affair and witnessing the violent aftermath still haunted her. She found it difficult to trust others, always fearful that the people she cared about would hurt her like her parents had. Relationships, both romantic and familial, were strained and distant, as if she were constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. As for Thomas, prison became his new reality. Once a successful real estate agent with a bright future, his life had been reduced to the cold, monotonous routine of incarceration. The years stretched out before him, each day blending into the next. Behind bars, he had plenty of time to think about the choices he had made and the moment when his life had taken that irreversible turn.